Hello everyone. While you're listening to me, I want you to keep this in mind. Everyone wants to be heard. At the same time, everyone is afraid of being heard. I'm going to start by telling you a story, two stories actually. In my podcast, like Maggie has said, I am a podcaster, and one of the things that my podcast is known for is that I like to begin every episode with a story, because I think that stories are powerful medium. Stories are things that we can relate to wherever we come from, whether we are black, white, brown, and yellow with yellow dots, aliens. We can all relate, to stories. We are, yeah. And so I'm going to start with the first story. Like I said, I like to tell two stories. And some time ago, when I was single, a friend of mine asked to introduce me to someone who was also single. And I said yes. And so we arranged to meet in a coffee house, and on the day in question, I got all dressed up, beautified. I went to meet this guy. But I was there first with my friend, and so we went in there. It was like a glass house, so you could see someone coming in from outside. And so which afforded me the opportunity to see the guy before he actually came into the coffee house. And so as soon as the guy came towards, I hadn't seen him before, so I didn't know him. My friend just said, "That's him." And I looked at this guy, and I sat straight in my seat. You know how we ladies are. When you're interested in a guy, you don't need to tell someone that you're interested. Your body language shows it. So when this guy came, I looked at the guy. He was all buffed. I like working out. I like the outdoors, and I like exercising. And I could see that this was obviously someone who exercises a lot as well, who takes care of himself. And he looked very good on paper. And I thought to myself, that is going to be my man. And he came in, and he sat down, and he sat very straight. And again, I said, at that point, 70%, I was sure this would be my man. I was very excited. And so my friend introduced us, and we got talking. And a few minutes into talking, the guy said, "I have no fear. I'm not afraid of anything." And instantly, I checked out. I ran 440. I didn't run physically because it would have been rude to just stand up and leave. But in my culture, I come from Nigeria, by the way, when somebody says they run 440, they mean that they run so fast, they're so desperate to get away that they can lose something and not even take note of it. It's one of those cartoon figures that you see, and they're running from something, and their hats falling off, and their scarf falling off, and they're so desperate to get away, they're not even stopping to pick up whatever is falling off of them. That's how I ran. But in my head, I ran from this guy. Now, you're going to ask me, why did you run? Let's put a pin on that for a moment, and I go into my second story. When I was 8 years old, I was fostered by my uncle and his wife. My uncle was my mom's my mom's brother. My uncle was a very, very unusual man. He was extremely, extremely intelligent. One of those guys that you say 2 + 2 × 100 divided by 1 million, square root of this, and the moment you stop, he gives you the answer. That's how my uncle was. And now in my culture, we have our fosters, the kind of fostering that my uncle was going to do for me was nothing different. We have a sort of like a barter system. And what that means, that I don't know if you are aware of the barter system. It means that you give something in exchange for another thing. So if I have a pen and you have paper, and I give you my pen, I take your paper. So it works out usually well. Nigeria is a very, very big country. I don't know how many of you know that. And so I was in the East at this time. My family was in the East, and my uncle and his family were in Lagos. At that time, to get from the east to Lagos, where you had to take a long bus and the roads not fantastic, you could start in the morning at 6 and you got to Lagos even at 9, sometimes 11 if you're very lucky. Like I said, my uncle was a very unusual man. And actually, when my uncle was not even 20 yet, he was so brilliant that the entire village, they came together and they could see that this was someone that would be a great value and asset to the society. So everyone got together and they sent my uncle abroad to go to school, to university, one of the Ivy League universities in England. So when I was growing up, I was seen as someone a little child who was always very curious and very bright, you know. And so when my uncle came back, he thought that I reminded him of me, I reminded him of himself. And so he wanted to foster me. And so off I went to Lagos to be fostered by my uncle and his wife. And as soon as I got there, one day someone came to visit my uncle and his wife. And so someone came to visit my uncle. And this woman, few minutes into, being in the home, she noted to my uncle's wife, she said, "This child is very bright," meaning me. And then she said, "Come darling, what are you going to be? What would you like to be when you grow up?" And I said to this auntie, their guest, and I said, "I would like to be a doctor." I was very excited. I was just 8 years old, but I was really, really excited because in my society, I grew up in a society, even till now, where being a doctor is a big thing. If you ask, I think most African parents, if you ask them what they would like their child to be or their kids to be, they will tell you a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. If you said you wanted to be an artist, your mother would just look at you like, "Artist, drawing things. Is that what you're going to eat for? What an artist for what? Be serious." She would discard whatever your artistic tendencies. So when I said I was going to be a doctor, I was really excited. I looked at my auntie, my uncle's wife, because I thought she would praise me and say, "Wow, this is a bright child. She knows what she's going to be when she grows up." And I looked at my auntie, but instead of the pat on the back I expected, she looked upset. She looked pissed off, annoyed. I was just a child of 8. I didn't understand why she was looking so pissed off. And so when the guest left, the visitor left, my auntie called me and she said, "What did you say you're going to be again when you grow up?" And I said, "Doctor." I was still very excited because I thought, now the accolade is coming. She's going to pat me on. Kids, they want little praise. Even adults, we all want that recognition. And my auntie, I remember, I will never forget the look. It's been years. And my auntie looked at me from head to toe, from toe to up, and then she said to me, "For such an insignificant, useless girl, you certainly have big dreams. You're behaving bigger than your shoes." And from that moment onward, my auntie, my uncle's wife, she did everything to make me feel useless. She called me useless all the time. She called me stupid. And very soon the verbal abuse became physical. She will hit me. She will she will spit at me. I think for me that was the most difficult one for me to understand, the spitting, because it was so shocking to my soul, even as a little child. When if she pinched me, pinching was okay, I cried, but to spit at me, it just reduced me to nothing. As young as I was, I knew that you always spit at something that was completely like below the most below of things. And I didn't understand this. And along the way, I was still going to school. And of course, when she took me from my parents, you remember I said it was a barter system. And so my uncle had, 3 daughters at that time. So when I was taken by my uncle, the exchange in this respect was that I would be like a senior sister to my cousins. I was 8 years old, the oldest was 4, So the others were really little. So the idea was that I'll be their big sister and play with them. So that was the exchange. But as soon as I got to Lagos, the reverse was the case. My auntie, my uncle's wife, was a nurse, and she would make me wash. It's not the time of washing machine. She would make me wash our uniform and starch it. Put starch. The starch was like we had to mix it right, and wash this hard uniform and make it right. And when I didn't do it right, I was hit, and I was, hit repeatedly. It's a long story. Anyway, along the way, there were so many things that happened in the course of my being raised by my auntie. And one of the things was that sometimes she would give me something that she knew I did not like to eat. And I would just say to her, Auntie, sorry, I don't want to eat this. I don't like to eat it. And she knew that I didn't like to eat this thing, but she would take the food and she would put it all over me. She would stick it in my ear, in my nose. She would put it all over me. And then she would say, you useless girl, you want to waste my food. And when she was done putting the food all over me, she would ask me, or she would tell me, not ask, or ask is polite. She would tell me to take the trash, and then go to the trash dump across her house to throw it away. And of course, she wouldn't let me clean this thing off my body. My auntie was very big on humiliation, so she abused you. It was not just enough to abuse you. When she abused you, she wanted to humiliate you as well, and she wanted everybody to see you humiliated. And so, of course, most of the time I would walk out with food all over me, and the main road cars passing, I would see people turning and looking at this side, this little girl with food all over her. And I'm sure I was a sight. Anyway, and that was my life for about 7 years of being with my uncle, being raised by my uncle. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do very much, I wanted to go to school so desperately. And in spite of all of the hardship, I was able to make it in school. I was still bright. In fact, most of the time to go to my school was about, at that time, I think, maybe 5 kilometers. And because my uncle was a middle-class home, so they were quiet. Somebody went to an Ivy League school abroad, so you know that they're not poor. So my cousins were often driven to school. I was never, driven to school. I had to walk to my school. And before I even go to school, before I went to school, I had to make sure every household chores was done. I had to sweep, I had to clear the plates that everyone ate. I had to make sure water was ready. And then I always got to school quite late. And when I got to school, I was late. Most of the time, I was caned by the teachers. It's quite normal. They used to cane like, why are you late every day? And so besides the abuse I was getting at home, I was always getting caned in school, but I could not, tell them what was going on. Because in this space, although I was a very vivacious girl at the beginning, I talked. Before long, in my home, in my uncle's home, that voice was taken from me. I could only speak when I was spoken to. And if I was asked a question, it was either yes or no. There was no in between, because if I tried to explain why I did whatever I was told that I did, I was slapped and told that I was being disrespectful. Anyway, so let's just put that story aside for a moment. Now, years later, after much work on myself, and when I got to go to school, not through my uncle, through my own efforts, through a lot of hardship, I managed to educate that's how badly I wanted to study. I thought, when I was asked why I wanted an education so badly, I would always say, I want to educate myself so that I could eat, when I grow up, I would get a job. I could eat whatever I wanted to eat and refuse whatever I did not want to. Sorry, it's a little emotional. Without having the food all over me. I said I wanted an education so my own children would never have to go through what I did. Very emotional. It's been years, but it still gets me emotional. Anyway, this was what I said was the reason why I wanted to go to school. And also in this time, after I left my uncle's home, I could not tell my story. My aunt, you know how it is when, if you're told often that you're stupid, no matter how bright you are, after a certain point, you start to behave like you're stupid. It's conditioning. That's that, the power of conditioning. You put somebody in a certain space, you condition them. After a while, even when they escape from that thing, they have been so conditioned to think a certain way, they cannot let go of that. And so, even though I knew that it was not my fault that I had been abused like that, I couldn't tell my story because I always felt that if people knew my story, that somehow it will confirm, something inside the story will kind of make them look at me like I was stupid, that it will confirm to them that I was stupid. You see, that's why I wanted you guys to be aware of that. Everybody wants to be heard. At the same time, everyone is afraid of being heard. I wanted to be heard, but at the same time, I was afraid of being heard. And then, some years down the road, I overcame that fear and I made my voice heard. And so I put that story also aside for the moment. I'd like to ask the audience a question. I said at the beginning, we are all different people. We come from different backgrounds. We have different cultures. But you can say, can someone tell me, you know, two things that is common to everybody, everyone, no matter where you come from? Can anyone take a guess? The two things that is common to us. One thing that we all have. Can anyone guess what we all have?
Life.
We have life, certainly.
Bread.
We have bread. What? Okay, so let's come back to my friend. We all have fears. Whether we like it or not, we all have fears. And there's also something, apart from what we have, there's one thing that we want, everybody wants. Doesn't matter how old we are, from what culture you come from, there's one thing that everyone wants. Again, can somebody tell me what that is? Do you know what we all want? Thank you very much. Perfect, you got it right the first time. We all want love. We have fears and we all want love. But there's one thing, there's only one solution to overcoming our fears and getting the love that we want. Again, sorry, I'm not lecturing you, but again, who can tell me what that is? Can you guess what that is? The one thing that is the solution to fear, to overcoming fear, and to getting love. This is good. That's not what I'm looking for right now.
Self-love.
Self-love is good, but that's not what I'm looking for right now. Okay, the one thing that we need to overcome our fears.
Faith, love, to
Thank you. Yeah. Faith is good, fantastic. And to gain the love that we want is vulnerability. Vulnerability. Vulnerability, vulnerable, you know, vulnerable. Yeah. Vulnerable. You see? Yeah, okay, vulnerable. See, vulnerability is the solution to overcoming our fears. It's the solution to getting love. Let me explain. You see, in order for you to overcome something, you have to first of all admit that you have that thing. No? If you're going to the doctor, before you get to the doctor, you have to first of all admit that you be willing to admit that you're sick. If you say you're not sick, what are you going to the doctor for? Because you get that the doctor says, what's wrong with you? Nothing is wrong with me. So what are you doing here? So you have to admit. And so vulnerability is the solution that we do need. But how many of us are willing to be vulnerable? Very, very few of us are willing to be vulnerable. Because we look at vulnerability as a tool that can harm us rather than as something that can empower us. You know, and this is, I was saying that I'm going to tell you why I ran from the guy. It was because he did not admit to being vulnerable. He said he had no fear. Everyone has fears. The way that I saw, the moment you say you have no fear, it means that you are not someone who is working on yourself. You know, becoming the best version of oneself is not a destination, it's a process. But you have to be willing to engage in that process. I had looked at my past. I knew it took me a long time to admit, to speak to people about what happened to me as a child. It took a lot of courage to admit. But it was only when I was willing to be vulnerable and admit what happened to me, that was when my healing began. And the thing, so here I was in front of this guy who was looking all beautiful like an Adonis. Oh, I looked at and thought, there's my man. And the moment he sat down, he said he was not afraid of anything, he had no fear. The thing is that whether we like it or not, we are the product of our environment. You know, who we hang around with will determine who we are. If you hang around with positive people, it will bring out positivity in you. If you hang around negative people, it will bring out negativity in you. If you hang around people who are willing to admit that they are flawed human beings, you know, it will bring out also, empower you to look at your own, what do you call it, your own shortcomings. And you look at your shortcomings, not because you want to beat yourself up, but it's like a mirror image. You stand in front of your mirror and say to yourself, Sarah, my name is Sarah, by the way, this is who you are. Not because you want to look at yourself negatively, but with the aid of bettering the things that you can, so that you can accept yourself, so that you can love. Love that you want from someone starts with loving yourself. Loving yourself starts with vulnerability, your being willing to be vulnerable. You see, when I was talking about this foster system in Nigeria, sometimes when I talk to people, they say, how could your parents send you off? It's not a bad thing. It's something that works for everyone. And this was my uncle. It's more like our own Erasmus, you know. You send your kids, a 15-year-old child to America, it's going to live in someone's home that is never met. You know, it's exchange. So he goes there to learn something that will make him, empower him. And hopefully it takes something there that will give them a different mindset. You know, it's an exchange thing. And so when I looked at this guy, like I was said, he said to me, have no fear. And I had to tell myself, do I want a relation so badly that I'm willing to put myself in a situation that will rob me of everything that I've learned, all the power that I've given myself in the process of that learning? And the answer was no. Although I wanted a relationship, although I looked at this man, I was very good to look at, but what I wanted more was myself. I wanted myself. I had gained myself. I was still gaining myself. And I didn't want to put me in a position of losing myself by being, you know, having a boyfriend or partner is a very intimate situation. It's like inviting another soul into your own soul. They are supposed to communicate. So if I invite a negative soul into my soul, what kind of communication is that soul going to engage with my own soul? What am I going to take, you know, from that? And so that's why, in a sense, I call myself, my brand is called From Fearful to Fierce. You know, what From Fearful to Fierce is about the actions, the little intentional actions that we take daily. to better ourselves. And those intentional actions lead us to going from fear, from being a fearful person, to be a strong, fierce, powerful person. And all of that starts with vulnerability. And so at the end of this, this is a women's health. Health starts with our mind. What you think is what you are. Who you associate with is who you are. There's a saying that show me your friends and I can tell you who you are. And so for me, my life is very intentional. But there's one thing I want to leave with you, ladies, today. If I leave you nothing, please I leave you with one thing. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability is power. If you want to overcome fear, start with being vulnerable. If you want to love, start with being vulnerable. If you want to be tolerant, start with being vulnerable. Vulnerability is a powerful tool. You cannot get there without it. It's like saying you're going to China. It's like your plane. If you don't have it, you can't go to China. Are you going to fly by yourself? Maybe there will be a possibility sometime in the future where you can fly by yourself. But until then, you need the plane. Vulnerability is that plane for you. And that's why my brand is called From Fearful to Fierce. Because I came from a very fearful, dark place. And today I can very, very proudly say that I'm a powerful woman, not just in words. I'm a powerful woman, an amazing woman. I'm a lovely woman, sometimes stern. I'm a trustworthy woman. You know, sometimes you think the experience you have can turn you bitter. But you know what I'm grateful to God for? That my experience did not make me bitter. When next I speak, I will speak about what my my meeting again with my auntie years later when situation changed. And that's a speaking for a topic for another day. For the moment, be vulnerable. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you.